First of all, my guests are here this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by NHS Dr. Renée Hoenderkamp and broadcaster, lawyer and futurist Andrew Eborn. Right, let's start with this Prince Harry story. Before the break, I said to you I would tell you how much of your taxpayers' money has been spent on this judicial review that Prince Harry called for to ask that he might have armed protection, royal protection with guns. £300,000, Renée Hoenderkamp. Are you OK with that?
Oh, firstly, I'm so tired of talking about Harry and Meghan.
But this isn't about Harry and Meghan. This is about our money this time. We spend a lot of time talking about their money and how much they have. This is our money.
I'm actually a bit torn on this. I really am, because I do think that he fought for our country in Afghanistan as a Prince of England, and he still is a member of the royal family, whatever you may think. And if he needs protection, as do all of the members of the royal family, then he should get it. I really do. However, I think if we don't offer this protection with guns to the other members of the royal family, then he shouldn't. I just don't think he can just whip out his chequebook and pay for it. That's the problem. But at the same time, we're running up such big costs defending it that would it just be cheaper to give it to him?
Well, that would mean common sense had prevailed, and we don't live in that sort of world, Renée. What are you talking about? I mean, look, this is the thing. He said, we'll pay for it.
He did.
I mean, frankly, they can afford it.
They can, indeed.
You know, the
royalties from the book alone would help.
The book alone, absolutely. But, of course, then the royals have said, well, you can't pay for it, because that would mean any royal family could just arrive here and pay for it.
And this is the big problem I have with this story, is that it's all about the headlines, and turn around, it's a Harry and Meghan the story, and therefore we've got to approach it from a negative point of view. The truth of the matter is, this is how much has been spent on the wonderful profession of lawyers fighting this case.
So all your fault.
I love it when it's my fault.
Every time on this show, everything is your fault.
I have the broadest shoulders ever. But what we like to do is to shine a spotlight on it. So the 300 grand is talking about the legal fees. There are two issues here. The first is, should they get protection? Personally, I believe they should. And they are going to get protection when they're doing their royal security for formal events. They're going to get that. The second is, when they're not doing those, because they're no longer royals, should they get that protection?
When they're doing the Netflix
which is now the Netflix thing. And then you turn around, does the Home Office have an obligation? So that's a legal question, which would be determined by the courts. But we're throwing so much mud around, we miss it. More light, less heat, is what I always say.
Of course, there's the personal element of this, Renée, because this is effectively a father saying to his son, I won't pay for you to have the best protection when you are here. Like, there's that emotional... Imagine being the parent and having to make that decision.
I know. So I think Charles is in almost an impossible situation here, because on the one hand, he has to be the king, he has to be seen to be being frugal, which he's trying to do, but then he's his son, and I'm sure he's actually really torn. We all know. We've got children, we know what it's like. I mean, maybe they should just stay away.
Oh, do you think they should be there at the coronation?
Look, I think, of course, they should be there. They are members of the royal family. But I actually do think that these two are going to bring so much publicity with them. They're going to milk it so much. It should be about the king and his coronation, and it's going to be about Harry and Meghan. Part of me thinks they should stay.
What I really love, is that they've managed to work it out that it's going to be on Archie's 4th birthday, which is also on May the 6th. So in that glorious way, the king, they obviously had a conversation behind the scenes. Let's celebrate Archie's 4th birthday in style. Let's do the coronation at the same time. So that's probably what happened.
Oh, I did not know that.
There you go. We like to break news
and it's
here.
A good excuse, apparently. This is one of the reasons why Meghan may not come, which I find absolutely ridiculous as a mother of a 4-year-old. You're talking to the woman here who went on honeymoon on her own because my husband had something else to go to. So, you know, missing a 4-year-old's birthday surely isn't very high on the list.
But she will use that then as the excuse.
She will.
I can't possibly go to the coronation because I've got a 4th birthday party to throw. Oh, come on. Yeah, as if. Right. Right, OK, let's go on to this next story now. This is any excuse to talk about the great Ron DeSantis in Florida, from me, as you know. Interesting health story, though, Renée, isn't it? That doctors in Florida are now being told to warn recipients of the COVID jabs that the shot could cause adverse effects, including heart attacks. Why has it taken so long?
Right, so why has it taken so long? So my big issue with the vaccine has always been not that we should cancel it and not do it. I think if it has value for vulnerable people, then it has value. But my big issue is that we were never consenting people in the way that we are trained as doctors to do. You know, we are told that we should give fully informed consent, even if some of that is bad. And if somebody then makes a decision not to have something, even if we think they're being foolish, and they're competent, we should leave them alone and let them make it. We've done none of those things. So we knew very early doors, Bev, that this was causing myocarditis in younger men especially, very early doors. I was mocked on the BBC for saying this.
Well, it was in Pfizer's own trial, in their original trial.
Yeah, you know, and people said, oh, but it's so tiny, it's so tiny. And my point always was, yes, but does that 18-year-old actually need this vaccine, or do they need myocarditis? You know, it's time for us to actually be grown up, treat this medicine, this vaccine, as we should all medicines, and say to people, look, there is this risk of you getting this, there is this risk of you getting COVID and being seriously ill. The decision is now yours. We haven't done that, and that's been the problem. And actually, Florida looks like they're ahead of the game on doing that.
But doesn't it show that how politics became so entwined with medical advice, Andrew? Because this is Ron DeSantis, who's basically he's a Republican, but he's very much anti-establishment. He's a maverick politician. He likes to carve his own path, and he's taken the politics out of it and said, let's just tell people they can have it if they want to. Don't have it if you don't want to, but these are the risks.
It has to, as you rightly said at the top, it has to be about informed consent. But we also have to make sure that we don't scare people. There's the whole thing about fear. It was the father of PR, Edward Bernays, who said, if you want to sell anything, the easiest way is through fear. And so when you look at these sort of statistics, of course, like any medicine, you need to, and any vaccination, you need to turn around and say, look, these are the risks, and here are the percentages, and you've got figures here. In 2021, 41,473 vaccine-related injuries were reported in Florida. OK, well, those are the statistics. You work out how many people had the vaccine and what the positive effects were, and then you make an informed decision. So I'm all for informed consent. I'm not for scaremongering unnecessarily.
Britain! Vueling Airlines believes you deserve more. Enough with the weather. Embrace what you deserve. An airline with flights from just 30...
Well, I mean, we had a lot of scaremongering necessarily, ironically, you could say.
Well, exactly.
It went the other way, didn't it?
I mean, and we still have it. We still have, for example, you know, celebrities putting out videos saying that the unvaccinated should be locked at home. You know, this is carrying on, and this is abuse of our freedoms as people, our ability to make a decision about something. We were treated like babies, not even children.
Yeah.
You know, I can reason with my 4-year-old. We were treated like babies who could not absorb information and make a decision. And it's nice to see that there are areas in the world that are doing that, and there are other countries as well.
Yeah.
You know, the Nordic countries have been quite ahead of the game in saying, no, someone under 50 doesn't need this vaccine. For me, it comes back every single time to informed consent. And as a doctor, if you weren't happy to do that, you weren't upholding your oath.
And that's the frustration, isn't it? That informed consent underpins so much of medical ethics in this country. It is the cornerstone upon which it is all built. Whether you're going in to have a caesarean section or one of the procedures that you want robots to do, you have to give the patient, a pregnant woman isn't a patient, but you know what I mean, you have to give the recipient of those interventions a full list.
Absolutely. And this is the problem as well, though, is that in lockdown, and even before that, with Brexit, everybody becomes an expert. And all of a sudden, they've got no medical training at all.
Apart from the experts.
Apart from the experts. And this is the crazy thing about it. So I always say, question everything, listen to the experts, and then you can make an informed decision.
And yet, if you'd asked your doctor about the risks of myocarditis, as they will now know in Florida, they wouldn't have done them anyway.
And if I had £1 for every time early on, Bev, you would have seen it, that I was told on Twitter that I was just a GP. What did I know? Well, you know what? Just GPs have exactly the same medical training as every other doctor.
And if you had £1 every time, you would be able to afford school fees for your 4-year-old.
Yeah, I was just a journalist and I knew this, so, you know. Right, but first, my guests are back with me this morning. NHS doctor Renée Hoenderkamp and broadcaster, lawyer and futurist Andrew Eborn.
I love the rolling R on that one as well.
Renée Hoenderkamp. Right, we are looking at this story about the fact that, OK, one of my biggest issues in life is litter.
Yes.
I know that sounds a bit sad to suggest it's one of my biggest issues.
I agree with you.
I am that person who will see someone drop a packet of crisps and I will go and pick up the packet and give it back.
Me
and politely
too.
say, I think you've dropped something, and they're normally so embarrassed that they have to, oh yeah, yes, and put it in their pocket. So motorways, I don't know whether you've noticed, but our motorways at the moment and roads, it's like people are just emptying the litter out of the car.
They do.
What's happened to our sense of national pride?
Well, I think, I agree with you, and I said this to Andrew, I'm that person too who goes, up and gives people back their litter and say, I think you dropped this. Because I was brought up by my mother that you never drop litter in the street. I mean, we weren't supposed to eat in the street ever either. She was really, really strict. And, you know, she taught me to have pride. So for me, this comes back to parenting. And it does. You know, if we're not teaching our children, if children in that car are watching mummy and daddy chuck their rubbish out of the window, that's what they will do when they grow up. You know, there's no respect for what's around us and believing that it's ours, that we've paid for it, we're paying for it with our taxes, we should look after it.
But do you know what I also worry about, Andrew, is this idea that the state literally, metaphorically sweeps up after us. Something has happened to the national psyche to think it's always the problem of the government. You can get rid of my mattress on the wall.
And you're absolutely right, and that's the problem with this story. You can always see the story from different perspectives. What this story is actually saying is the national highways are not doing their obligation. It does not excuse the national highways' shameful and scandalous track record of inaction and dereliction of duty, which is exactly your point. Two aspects of this is, one, people should not be throwing out the litter, and good old Jeremy Paxman, we love him, he was saying, we used to be, well, he came out today on Litter Brought Him Out.
Broadcasting has moved on since the days of Jeremy Paxman, no one's heard of him.
Exactly. Well, he now is a commentator on these matters. He said, we used to be a nation of shopkeepers, we aren't anymore, we're a nation of litter louts.
I agree.
So two sides of that, we are litter louts and we should stop it. The second, though, is the obligation to clear up. And what this story is focused on is the obligation, so Mike Pickering was saying that, Penning rather, was saying we need a cultural change to deal with this.
But we do, because if the litter wasn't there in the first place, we wouldn't be criticising the Highways Agency. And once again, you know, it takes money for the Highways Agency to pick things up. In terms of dumping mattresses and things, Bev, I think we've been really short-sighted as a
that was really random. If you were listening on the radio and said, why did Beverly talk about a mattress
I know why you did.
That's because we were showing footage of the fly tipping situation.
Right.
Fly tipping is really another scourge of our communities now.
Absolutely.
But I actually think local councils have themselves to blame for that. Because
agree.
we all used to be able to pitch up at our local tip and take our rubbish there, and we all did it. Now, a lot of people have to pay to take their rubbish there, and the moment you put money on that, they dump it on the streets. And I don't think anyone's doing the sums of, does it cost more to make people dump their rubbish on the streets or let them actually bring it to our tip? And now, since COVID, you had to book a slot at your tip, and many, many boroughs still keep that. So we've created that problem, the fly tipping one, but we need parents to take responsibility for their kids and educate.
You're absolutely, and I think the more we can get people, I'm sure the great British public watching this programme would say, absolutely, we should get pride in our appearance, not just of ourselves, but also in our streets and so on and so forth. And we also they need to look at it, what is the solution? Because if you suddenly put a skip outside, overnight, it suddenly gets all filled up, even if you're paying for it. We need to look at that in a sensible way. Don't just blame somebody else and expect them to clear up your own mess.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, and also more dustbins, please. More dustbins on the street, more dustbins in parks, and actually empty the dustbins. By the time it gets to a Sunday afternoon in some touristy areas, it's just a massive pile of rubbish because nobody's emptied the bins and it's all blowing down the street. Who knew litter could be so interesting? Right.
Load of rubbish.
Oh, very good. OK, right. NHS Woke Guidelines. This is... I'm sure you're all in favour of these, Renee. When somebody comes into your surgery, do you automatically assume you understand their gender? Because if so, that's not how you meant to do it in 2023, you know.
Apparently not, but I'm a dinosaur. Let's remember that. I'm a dinosaur. This was designed, this story, to make my blood boil. So we have seen this week that we are erasing language in our children's best books, and this is the same thing. We are trying to erase biological sex. We are trying to say there's no difference between men and women, that there's 100 different variations in between, and in order to do that, they are attacking doctors now and trying to teach them how to suck eggs. I'm not being funny, Bev, but if you walk behind somebody, it doesn't matter what they're wearing, what their hair's like, whether it's long or short, you know if it's a man or a woman.
When you walk behind them.
When you walk behind them, by the way that they walk. Men and women are different. When we're buried and they dig us up in 300 years' time, they will know that you and I were women and Andrew was a man just from our skeleton.
Just check. You are, aren't you?
It depends.
We can't assume.
I could be anything. I could play devil's advocate. I could do... but you're right. It's an assumption, I think. But it also boils down to, which nobody would disagree with, it boils down to respect. And there's a balance between... There are some legitimate arguments that you want to talk about respect and so on and so forth.
course.
This is a 16-page document which was done by a Dr. Michael Brady, who I don't know. Do you know Dr. Anyway, he's a national advisor for the LGBT health at NHS England. I'm not quite sure what you'd say in that 16-page, other than respect is a good start. What they then turn around and say, when you're asking, they give you the NHS Woke Guidelines, apparently.
I don't think they call them that. That's what they call them.
Well, apparently this came from, was it the Mail? I think they said this.
Yeah, but the NHS isn't actually embracing the word woke.
So they sort of turn around and say, you should ask open questions without making an assumption about somebody's identity. And if you've got a patient in front of you and it means a lot to them about their pronouns and so on and so forth, asking an open question, because you don't make assumptions, you don't say, are you Miss, Mrs.
Of course not.
You don't do that. You want to try and treat the patient. So trying to play devil's advocate. They're also saying, which I find extraordinary, facial expressions. There are some GPs, they say in this report, who will back away. And I don't know the evidence for this, but I would always question everything. If that's the case, that's not respect, which is why I started this whole thing about it. It's down to respect.
But I don't believe that happens. I'm sorry.
That's why I'm asking.
I don't believe that a doctor, when told that somebody is a trans patient and wants to be called whatever, backs away. I think that's nonsense. We've all been trained in the same way. We all see patients every day. We know how to handle them. Obviously, some people will be better than others, but I think that's just nonsense. But what worries me about this is it's actually dangerous in the end. So if we extrapolate this to where they want it to be, and we only call people with cervixes for a smear and people with prostates for their prostate check or whatever it is, it's dangerous, because 50% of women do not even know what their cervix is. They don't know they have a cervix. They do, however, know they are a woman. So we are condemning people to miss important cancer screening. Yes. You know, of course I have patients who are trans, and I will call them whatever they want to be and respect them totally as I would any other patient. And I do have patients, and that is not a problem at all. But this complete, you know, dictating to doctors how they treat people, we have now got to a situation in hospitals, and this is not a joke I'm about to tell you, where we have 60-year-old men with beards being asked if they could be pregnant.
And it's the tyranny of the minority, is it not? At the cost of the majority. That's what worries me.
Yeah, I you're right, but boil down to respect and get rid of the craziness, but also stick to the facts.
Just be polite.
Stick to the facts.
Just be polite.
And be kind.
Do you know what I want from my doctors when I walk in? I want them to tell me their name. Most importantly, hello, I'm Dr. Renée. Stick around, we'll be discussing this later on. But first, my guests are still here with me, my panel. I'm delighted this morning. NHS doctor Renée Hoenderkamp and a broadcaster, lawyer and futurist Andrew Eborn. So, should Prince Andrew keep his £30 million mansion? Discuss, Andrew Eborn.
Well, I think it's very interesting because he's now inherited a lot of money, Prince Andrew.
Of course.
And I know it's probably the tiniest violin ever that you can find with people standing around with a bit of sympathy. So he's always denied the allegations, even though he paid reputedly £12 million to somebody he may never have met. And there's all sorts of evidence being offered that it might have been a fake photo in this era when you can have fake photos, and we've spoken about that on this very show. But now what's happening, he's worried that King Charles will stop him having his allowance of £249,000, and as a result... A year.
So he has £250,000 a year just for his wages?
Just for being... because he's no longer royal duties, but this is what the Queen used to give him. But to stay in a £30 million house costs a lot of money, because you've got to do lots of repairs and so on and so forth. So, as I say, it's a sob story, which I think, when people are talking about heating or eating, is not going to get the great British public behind them.
It really isn't, but I think it plays into the arrogance of the Duke of York. I really do. I mean, from what I've read about him, he's he's got a very inflated opinion of his own self-worth and his intelligence, apparently neither of which are as good as he thinks they are. And this is the fact that he feels able, as you rightly say, Andrew, in this time when people really are struggling to heat their homes, to moan that he might not be able to stay in his £30 million house is just evidence of that. He's just arrogant, he's away with the fairies, he's out of touch with people, and frankly, as you've said, he inherited a lot from his father when he died, from his mother when he died. I don't believe for a second that he can't afford to pay for his house. He just doesn't want to.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And in fact, you've all been getting in touch. We were talking about Harry earlier. And a lot of you are saying that actually he has walked away from his royal duties. This is the one that I like. Dee said, even Princess Anne, the Queen's daughter, who carries out endless events a year, only ever gets protection at official events. Harry and Meghan would have been the same. The trouble is, Princess Anne is so wonderful.
Oh, she is. And she's
so wonderful that any royal that comes out and says something like this, you always go, what what would Princess Anne do? That's my litmus test.
It is the litmus test, and she's brilliant, and has been a great ambassador for things like the Olympics and so on and so forth, and around the world. She calls it as it is. You have the honour of meeting her and that sort of stuff.
Spare.
Brilliant.
And she was a spare, but she didn't feel the need to whinge about it and write a book.
Yeah. No. I'd love to know what she thinks about this. Oh. I think we can probably guess what she thinks about Prince Andrew.
Coming up after the break. It's going to be good.
If you're watching, do get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Right, Biden in Ukraine. This is a story that's just broken this morning. A televised joint statement flanked by Biden. Zelensky has said that the democratic world has to win this historic fight. Are you being swept along with this tide of kind of enthusiasm?
Well, it's a very big brush that they're using, I can tell you that. I mean, I felt very uncomfortable a couple of weeks ago when I watched all of our elected MPs fawn and fall over themselves to actually look at Zelensky and shake his hands like he was the second coming of Jesus. It was absolutely ridiculous. We cancelled Prime Minister's question times to just accept sycophantic questions when, again, we have people in this country who can't afford to heat their homes. And now we've got Biden in Ukraine, the most important visit ever. Look, I think we need some balance in this. I think we need to actually turn the spotlight back home and say, look, this is terrible. Nobody in Ukraine should be suffering because Putin wants to take them over. Yeah. But at the same time, we have an awful lot of suffering here. And I want some of that spotlight that seems to be eternally on Ukraine turned home.
Yeah.
I think there are two things to this. And again, providing balance. War is...
You're suggesting we're not balanced.
No, I'm suggesting we are balanced, and that's the whole point. And the great thing about this show, and we look at all points of view. And I can guarantee that both Ukrainians and Russians don't want this war, is the reality.
Of course.
And I also know the greatest thing, and Biden missed a trick. Joe Biden is an anagram of be joined. And you look at that sort of thing. Of course, it's a photo opportunity after photo opportunity and after photo opportunity. We need to stop the war because it's not benefiting anybody, and the more we plough money into it and the longer it carries on, it's awful.
So would you be in support of us giving jets, giving more firepower to Ukrainians now in order to bring it to a quicker end?
What's going to bring... Well, I think it's going to drag on forever. And the more that you keep throwing at it on both sides...
But we are in a ridiculous situation now where we are being accused by France and Germany of not having a military power strong enough that we could head NATO as we give away everything we have and money on top. You know, this is just a ridiculous situation. And actually, I would have thought it was such a massive security risk for the leader of the free world, as he is known, to pitch up in Kyiv today. You know, why did he need to do it?
Very good question.
It's a PR thing. I mean, you know why he needs to do it, because every other world leader is going along.
Does he need to do it?
Well, he's got good old Trump chomping at his heels, and you've got all those sort of things. You want to... And this is the problem that I've got. It's using a terrible situation, maybe for PR purposes, or people could question that. What is the narrative? You want to be the biggest superstar in the world at the moment, apart from Harry. You turn around and say, look, you want to have your things. He's always going to wear his battle fatigues. He's not going to dress up in a suit. But that's what you're going to try and do. And that's what I find objectionable in a way, is that war is horrible. It's horrible for both sides.
It's horrible for the civilians.
For the civilians. And I say civilians on both sides. My heart goes out for both.
Very, very profitable, don't forget, the military-industrial complex.
And people should look at that as well. Question everything is important.
Right, thank you both very much. Now,
it's constantly changing, and a new force, minimal clutter, declutter, get rid of things. That's the present time we're in. A new thing will come along. We're not sure what it is, but, you know, come back in 3 months' time and something new will emerge, and that'll be exciting, and everyone will start spending again.
Thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy Baker there, retail expert. I would love Andrew Eborn to share Jeremy's enthusiasm and his positivity. He said in the summer, what's going to happen between now and the summer to make my shopping experience better and to give some jobs back to those 15,000 people who've lost them?
Well, and there's two things here, and we always have this conversation because it's the I told you so moment, and every job that can be automated will be automated. We said this years ago.
Even if the customer is dissatisfied?
Well, I think, and this is where it goes, in terms of customer service, when you're phoning up people, and it's what they call the imitation game. And that's that wonderful test which Turing did to turn around and say you can fool somebody into believing they're talking to a real person when they're talking to a machine. That's the imitation game.
Yes.
And what's going to happen is you're right, you need to have the great experience. If it's a worse experience, that's not a positive thing. That's a negative, and your feedback is very helpful on that. I've always said that information is power. What I've said for many years, as you know, is I've predicted this moment. It's the moment when AI, artificial intelligence, will replace lots of jobs. It's when robotics will be replacing...
But why are you so happy about that, Andrew?
Well, firstly, and it sounds arrogant to say I predicted it, is that it's evolution. And what happens with any technological evolution, that's what's going to happen. It does mean, you're right, you then need to look at new jobs, the way that the workforce is going to be shifted.
You keep telling me we need to look at new jobs. Jeremy there's just said we've got to have a big change by the summer. What are these new jobs? Is everyone going to be a swimming pool lifeguard? I'm trying to work out what the summer jobs are going to be.
That's the problem. So what's going to happen is you need to educate people into a different sort of mindset. So if you understand...
A lazy mindset?
Well, no, I don't know if it's a lazy mindset. You can work in terms of... there will be more leisure time, is what I've said beforehand. But I know, but the difficulty is... But every revolution you have from a technology point of view, and I'm not being the harbinger of doom. I'm trying to say... Well, I'm trying to say...
You're the most smiley harbinger of doom I've ever seen.
Do you know, I think that the last sentence of that clip summed it all up, that retail evolves and things have to go.
This is the trouble.
Those things are human beings.
Yes.
And there are two sides to this. Not only do we know, and I'm speaking as a doctor now, that working is good for people's mental health. We also know that for some people, you know that 1 in 7 over 50s do not speak to another human being in 7 days. And sometimes that only human being they speak to is at the supermarket checkout, or if they stand next to me in a line because I'll talk to them. This is all heading towards universal basic income, where people sit on their backsides getting fatter and unhealthier, and their mental health decreases. I think it's appalling. And I don't think many of those people are able or want to be retrained to be coders or designers, which are also very isolated jobs.
Sure.
We are losing our human touch in everything we do.
And I said beforehand, it is our greatest opportunity, but it's also our existential threat.
Are you okay? I mean, universal basic income is being trialled in Wales at the moment as a solution to this problem. It's a neo-communist future. Are you happy with that?
I'm not at all happy about that sort of side. I think there's a difference between what I'm, as a futurist, back to the futurist, is what we're saying is that this is what's going to happen. So you had to be forewarned. What you've touched on is absolutely right. We don't disagree on that at all. People need jobs. It's tragic that these jobs are being lost, but people should be prepared. It's going to happen. And people make jokes about paper chase folding. I mean, you work on that sort of basis. There are human lives behind this. What you need to do, and we need to work, as Renée rightly said, we need to have a purpose in life. Without that... In an office.
Talking to people.
But otherwise it affects our mental health, it affects our physical health, and so on and so forth. What I can do is to tell you what's going to happen, so we can forewarn people on that sort of basis.
But it feels like there's loads of people telling us these changes are happening. You don't need to tell me. I can see it at the weekend. I can see it in every shop I went to at the weekend. I was seeking out the tills with the human being on it and having a conversation behind the ridiculous Perspex screens, which are still there. And I was talking to every single one of these poor people. They probably thought, I just wanted to come here and do my job. I keep getting... this woman won't stop nagging me. But I was saying to them, are you happy with the fact that you're the only person on the till and you've got 9 tills behind you with 9 frustrated customers on them? And they all just said, no, but we don't have a choice.
And I think that's muddying the water about advances in technology, because that's not, for me, that's not an advance. What that is removing the human element. You need to have, where you can have interaction, which is the real shame when you close down things like post office and banks and so on and so forth. People need people. When I talk about AI, it's to make efficiencies. It's to make people's lives better.
Because make no mistake, these changes are to benefit the profits of the companies that are making them. They have less people to worry about, less people to employ, less national insurance and tax to pay on those people, so our revenues go down. Make no mistake. And I actually tweeted last night, didn't know we were doing this story today, Bev. I tweeted about an ad I got on my Twitter feed from a big bank that said, speak to our friendly chatbot.
Yes.
Well, A, when has a chatbot ever done what you want it to do?
Never.
And B, how is a chatbot friendly?
And also...
but it will be. But that's the... And I say we're mixing two different things. Is one, it will be more efficient. We should never be a slave to technology. Technology should be there to empower us. To the extent it takes away that human interaction.
Why, when I'm at the supermarket, then, Andrew, and I am checking out my own shopping, I felt this week, I was like, hang on a minute, I'm doing someone's job here. I'm not getting... My shopping isn't any cheaper. I'm not getting paid to do someone's job. So someone's taking the mickey at the top of this business, Alfie.
But that's just a small element. I mean, self-checkout has been around for a long time. That's not really a shining example.
It is a shining example, not the whole bank of tills in a supermarket.
Because people, you're absolutely right, and I agree with you. I do agree with you. I think people need human interaction for the reasons I've mentioned. When I'm talking about AI, it's about efficiency, it's about technology being empowering us to do other things. It's not about the negative side. Where we need human interaction,
I don't ever feel empowered by AI. I can't think of a single evidence or example.
If it makes something more efficient,
where the AI makes you feel empowered.
And I gave example on a doctor's surgery and things like that. We talked about inefficiencies. Renée and I, we've occupied many studios around the world. What we often talk about, thank you, what we often talk about is not just about wages and so on and so forth. It's about inefficiency. And to the extent technology can improve efficiency, that's got to be good. So that's why I say that's a side. What you're talking about is a positive thing.
Their appointment with a human being online, fine, as long as they can do that.
Yes.
My GP surgery, when I try and do that, says, sorry, that service is not available.
Then there's a problem in the effective side.
Who'd have thought Little Britain would be so... Computer says no, computer says no. That's what we're hitting all the time. The tech is just not working. There's a real opportunity, actually, for some business to seize on this, because I don't think I'm alone in feeling like this, to seize on this idea that there are customers who want human beings and they want choice, they want interaction. Actually make a virtue of it. Set up a chain of shops which say, we only have human beings working on our tills. We will only have someone on the end of the phone.
And we take cash.
When you ring up a human being and we take cash, that's the place I'm going to spend my money. Right. Talking of money, you've spotted a mistake in the Times.
It's a headline. I always talk... What I love is about media watching, and people will often just regurgitate headlines in the news.
Not here.
Not here. Well, we question everything, and that's what I love about the show. It's on the front page of the Times, who I love. I love the Times. But it does say £14 house price rise. And what it goes on to say is the average cost of a home in Britain has risen by only £14 to £362,452, an increase of 3.9%.
Well, that's...
And I thought, well, hang about, is 14 quid 3.9%? So I did my maths, and I thought, hang on, that means that your house is 389 quid. I will buy everybody's house here today. That's my offer to you. Give me that money, I'll sort it out. They clarify later on page 18 that actually that was like the monthly increase. But the headline, this is the point about just reading headlines. The headline is misleading.
And it's being picked up by all of the news
Everybody's regurgitating it.
What it shows, Bev, is, and we've seen this over the last 3 years, how all news media just grabs a headline which is not absolutely representing what the story is and runs with it. And then people read it, regurgitate it, believe it, and it's hard then to dissuade them.
Just let me go to some of your views that you've been sending in this morning. Oh, do you know what really lit your fuse this morning? And ours, litter. Litter on the motorways and on the roads. Thank you. My inbox lit up with this one. Gary says, I'm so glad you've talked about the litter on the motorways. It isn't the fault of the litter pickers or the highway people. It's the disgusting humans that dump it out of the windows. It's our taxpayers' money who have to clear it up. That's not the way. And George says, we British are a scruffy race. During my years at sea in the Merchant Navy, the dirtiest, scruffiest ports I visited were here in the UK. Lots of you infuriated about that. What do we want to talk about now? Should we do a little bit on Roald Dahl before we go?
Oh, please.
Shall we?
Yeah.
So, Roald Dahl, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, amazing, of course, probably the world's greatest children's fiction writer. But now Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is not appropriate. Why not, Renée?
Well, because Augustus Gloop is now enormous, not fat. But we know he is fat. And the horse-faced woman isn't horse-faced, she just has a face. It's just the Oompa Loompas are now...
They're no longer green or orange or any colour at all, I think. And this is the problem. One of our biggest weapons in this world is language.
Yes.
And I think, and it's one of our greatest powers. The word is mightier than the sword, but boy, is that sword getting blunted by the current woke brigade. This is such a wrong thing. We need to embrace language. We need to turn around and celebrate that language. Taking little snippets out and rewording it is wrong.
I think
this is an attack. This is an attack on language. Language always changes. We know that. It evolves. Dictionaries change the odd word. We laugh at new words in the dictionary because of common usage. This is not that. This is a concerted effort to attack our language. And it's all about dumbing down and making everybody the same. I've just read, Alice, the BFG. And every time I say something like fizz-whizzer, It's the bottom burp. She looks up at me and laughs because she loves it. And the bit about Roald Dahl, whatever kind of man he was he was able to garner that imagination in children that we lose as we grow up, where they love those words, snozzcumbers, you know, absolutely love it. And to take that away, we have new parents have no say over this. They go and buy a Roald Dahl book and it's already been edited. So I say this, buy second-hand books, go back to the old editions and read your children what they want to read. And again, take back parental responsibility for what your children can read.
But isn't it funny, because it is this theme again that we talk about all the time, about somebody else deciding what is best for us and deciding what is best for our children. And I think these books, particularly, you know, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the humour is in these caricatures. That's what they are. They are characters and they are caricatures. The humour doesn't work. If Augustus Gloop gets stuck in that tube because he's a big bone,
he's enormous.
It's not quite so funny.
No.
Right, guys, thank you so much. I think we've come to the end of the show.
Love
Andrew, Eborn, lovely to see you. Renée, thank you so much. Right, it has flown by. Thank you for all of your messages as well.